So a common question I have when I work with buyers is they say, hey, I'm leasing right now. If I buy a house, can I break my lease? Well, you know what? That's what we're talking about today, so stick around. Hi, welcome back. My name's Joe Brown. I'm a real estate agent with Century 21, List with Beggins, located in South Tampa. Thank you so much for being here with me today. So, as I said in the introduction, sometimes I work with buyers and they say, hey, I'm renting a place right now. If I buy a house, can I break my lease? So I want to, because that's a common question, I just want to go over some of the rules about that, right? So the short answer in most cases is no, right? In most cases, but there are ways to look at that, and there are some exceptions. So number one, understand that a lease is a contract between you, the tenant, and the landlord. It is a contract. So you have to look at the lease. So here's my recommendation. Number one, if you are leasing and you want to buy a house, read the lease right now. Don't wait. Don't wait till you have a contract on a house. Read the lease right now and look at different provisions, right? So I'll talk about provisions in a second. But going back, a lease is a legal contract, right? Now, the landlord is not required to release you from the contract. That doesn't mean they won't, but they are not required to. And there is a way you can approach the landlord, and I'll share that with you in a second. So let's just talk about the consequence. Let's say you're under lease, you decide to buy a house, but you still have 6 months remaining on the lease. Well, if you move out and you think, oh, the landlord will just re-rent the unit, yes, the landlord could, but you have the contract with the landlord. So you would be on the hook to pay for the 6 months left on the lease. Or if you decide not to pay, the landlord could send you to a collection agency, which in that case, you'd have to pay more than the lease because the collection company has fees as well. And it could even lead to lawsuits for breach of contract. So that's why I say, look at the lease even before you start looking for the house. Now, it may not be such a big issue if there's only 2 months left in the lease, but if you're 6 or 7 months left in the lease, then it becomes more of an issue. But here's some things you want to look for in the lease, right? So number one is a home buying or mortgage clause. Now, this is rare, but sometimes they are in the lease. And so you have to look for that. Now, here's the caveat, right? So you move to the area, you know you're going to look for a house, but you need a place to stay now. So you rent an apartment or duplex or whatever. Well, you can negotiate even before signing the lease and say, hey, I want you to know I'm going to look for a house. Can we put in a home buying clause that if I buy a home and qualify for a mortgage, I am released from this lease, okay? You can negotiate that ahead of time. But also check your lease. That may be in there now. It's rare, but it could be there. Also, the lease sometimes has an early termination clause. So go back to, you have 6 months left and you look at the lease, and the lease may have a provision that says, if you break this lease early, you lose your security deposit. Okay, well, can you live with that? Right? Again, I'm not saying your lease has it. I'm saying go back, read the lease. Is that clause in there? Some leases, and again, this is rare, but some leases allow sublet, which means you have the contract with the landlord. You're buying a house, you're moving out, but you have a friend who needs an apartment, and they're willing to take over the lease, right? And so the landlord keeps getting his money. You're still on the hook in case your friend doesn't pay. But sometimes the landlord has to approve the subleasee. So again, is that provision, is the right to sublet the apartment part of the lease? Sometimes leases have a notice requirement saying you are allowed to break this lease with 3 months notice or 2 months notice. Again, I'm not saying your lease has it. I'm going to keep harping on this. Read the lease. Does your lease have this clause? And I think standard in a lot of leases is if you break the lease early, you're going to have to pay a month's rent and you're going to lose your security deposit, right? So there are some lease clauses to look for or to negotiate for before you even sign the lease. Now, there are some legal ways to break the lease. And number one is just be upfront with the landlord, and you can negotiate an early termination. For example, if you live in a complex that people want to move to and there are no vacancies, then in the landlord's mind, it would be very easy to re-rent your unit. So you can approach the landlord or property manager and say, listen, I'm buying a house. Can I be released early, knowing I may lose my security deposit, and you can re-rent the unit? And they may be okay with that. They may not, but they could. There may be costs associated with breaking the lease. Again, that could be spelled out in the lease, but if it's not, you can negotiate with the landlord to terminate the lease, but there's a cost associated with that. Now, there are some protected legal clauses, right? Protected legal classes. So, for example, if you're military and you get a PCS order, well, you have to break the lease. And by law, you have to be released from your lease to PCS. Second is domestic violence protection, right? If you're living in an apartment and there's domestic abuse going on, then you should be allowed to break the lease. Now, that really doesn't fit with I'm buying a house, can I break the lease? But there are a couple provisions for breaking the lease that are legal, and they may have nothing to do with buying the house, right? But take a look at it from the landlord standpoint, right? The landlord does not have to terminate the lease because you're buying a house, and they may make you stick with the lease. They do not have to allow sublet. If the rent goes unpaid, they could send it to collection agency, or they could sue you for breach of contract. So I have a lot of this in my blog. So let me tell you a little bit about the blog. I've started a new website just for my blogs, and it's joebrown.live. I'll put a link to that here, joebrown.live, and it's just going to have my blogs, and this is one of the blogs. But in this blog, there's a sample letter that you can give to your landlord. right? But here again, the big thing, if you're looking for a house that you're renting now, looking for a house, look at the lease right now. Don't wait. Look at the lease right now. What provisions are there to break the lease early? Number two, communicate with the landlord early, right? Let the landlord know what you're planning and what are the options. Because if you have 7 months left on the lease and you say to the landlord, listen, I'm looking for a house. Is there any way I can break the lease early? And if they say absolutely not, then you know it's really financially better just to wait towards the end of the lease, right? So you don't go through the motions of looking at a house and put offers in and all that, right? So do me a favor, go to my website, joebrownc21.com. There's, you can search for homes, you can contact me. Also go to my website, joebrown.live, read the blogs, reach out to me if you think I can help. I want to be your trusted advisor. So until next week, take care.